Hey, what's going on guys? Welcome to another video. My name is Rowan and today's video I want to talk about this Canon EOS 5 film camera, so you could call it a review. So this is my Canon EOS 5 film camera, also known as a Canon EOS A2 or A2E camera in other parts of the world. This is a semi-pro camera that was built between 1992 and 1997. I've had my particular camera for a good part of 3 years now and I've used it extensively, and I thought it would be ideal for me to talk about it since it is a camera that I primarily go to for most of my serious work. I won't go on a full-on technical review of the camera, but here are a few specs which I think are worth mentioning. This camera's got a shutter speed range of 30 seconds all the way up to 8,000th of a second. The camera uses a 2CR5 6-volt battery. It can shoot up to 5 frames a second. This camera's got a technology called the eye control focus point, so basically it allows you to select a focus point by looking at it once you've calibrated the camera to your eye. So I'm going to talk about things that I really like about this camera, and I'll start with the most important thing of all is image quality. So basically, this being a film camera, image quality is mainly determined by the film that you run through the camera and the lens that you've put in front of the body. Unlike with digital, where the sensor inside the camera will determine a huge factor with regards to image quality, when it comes to film cameras, the lens and the film that you actually use in the camera are the main contributors to your quality of film. The camera body is just there to help you house the filming, guide the light into the lens onto the film itself. But why I mention image quality for this camera is the fact that this camera is an EOS camera. So this being a Canon EOS camera, it's got Canon's EF mount, which allows you to use all of Canon's EF lenses, not the EFS lenses which are built for crop sensors. This uses the EF only lenses. So all the Canon lenses that are built for Canon full frame cameras will work on this camera. So all your L series lenses and all your EF normal style lenses will work on this camera, which gives you the option to have a large choice of lenses to give you optimum image quality on this camera. Another thing I like a lot about this camera is its autofocus system. Canon is known over the years to produce very good autofocus systems in their digital cameras, and these cameras as well, the older film SLR type cameras, have got a very reliable autofocus, and I really like that I can trust and rely on this focus system in this camera, especially when I'm shooting serious work on film. Adding to the reliable autofocus system in this camera has got a very accurate light meter in it. It has got all the options that I am familiar with in my digital Canon cameras. So it's got your spot metering, your evaluative metering, and your center weighted metering, which come ideally which are very much helpful, especially when you are shooting in tricky conditions. Most older film SLRs, so your older manual style film SLRs, will normally only meter for a scene using sort of like an evaluative scene, so where it measures the whole scene in general and tries and picks an exposure from that. And with the other options in this camera, so if you've got a very dark subject in a very bright backlit scenario, you've got the option on here to use a spot metering system or a center weighted system, which is center weighted is the one I precisely use 90% of the time when I shoot portraits. Also, on top of all of that, this camera has got a very familiar layout to my digital camera. So every time I have this camera in hand, it just feels like it's second nature for me, where all the controls are. They are in the very same sort of layout as my digital camera. My digital Canon camera, it's got the back wheel in the front, it's got the front dial here, it's got the mode dial here on top, and it's just very familiar when you use it. It's changing settings is a very straightforward thing for me, and I can easily, I'm very used to my digital setup on my Canon camera, so I this is just second nature for me. Another thing I like about this camera is it is quite a rugged camera. It's a body that is basically made from plastic, but it's a very hard, strong plastic, and it feels very, very rugged. I recently had this camera fall off the height of a table here. My son pulled the camera strap that was attached to it, and the camera fell to the floor and opened up its door seal, exposing some of the film that was loaded in the camera. I hadn't finished shooting a whole roll, and a couple of exposures were damaged. But when I closed the camera up again, it seemed to have not suffered any scratches or any damage, and it's still working fine. And that is just testament of how well this camera is built. It's got a very rugged style body, and it's also got a very big sort of a grip. It looks like it's got an extended sort of, most cameras will end over here. It's got sort of like an extended, I don't know if you can see, it's got sort of like an extended body. It looks like it's got a built-in battery grip to it. So it looks like, it basically looks or feels the same as a normal camera would feel once you've attached a battery grip to it, which gives it a very nice feel in your hand, a very solid grip to it. The downsides being is it gives extra weight to the camera, and also it takes up a bit more space. So if you're a fan of compactness of a camera, this is quite sizable. So back in the day, all the Canon professional film SLRs, the range went from, you've got the EOS 1, which is the top of the range, and you've got an EOS 3, which was like second tier top of the range, and then you've got this, which was like third tier. It was like, as I say, semi-pro camera. So if I was to make an example in the digital era, you've got in Canon's hierarchy, you've got a 1DX Mark II, which is the very top of the Canon range. Then you've got cameras like the 5D, which are sort of still considered a pro camera, but not at the top tier like a 1D Mark II. And then you've got your sort of like your Canon EOS 6D, which is, I would say, the same sort of range as this would have been in that time. It's not an entry level consumer body, but it is also not a very high-end top body. So that being said, it makes this camera sort of, I won't say less desirable, but it is not as considered highly as the EOS 1V or 1VN or the EOS 3 film cameras, which is advantageous because this camera is very, very, very affordable. I picked this one up for just under 1,000 Rand, which is less than $100 US, and I've looked on eBay, and the average price for it is about $120, $150 US for a very solid camera, which I think is a bargain. Another thing I like about this camera is the fact that it is an automatic winding, automatic film loading camera. So basically you put the film in the camera, line it up with the marker, close the back door, the camera will automatically load it onto the spool, and it will automatically, every time you take a shot, it will automatically advance to the next frame without you having to wind or whatever. And once you are done with the roll, the camera will automatically shoot the film back straight into the roll, into the film canister. So with regards to that, it's just film loading with this camera is totally straightforward, very easy, quick, and fully automatic. I also love the fact that this camera's shutter speed goes all the way up to 1/8,000th of a second, which is very cool. For instance, like me, I shoot a lot of portraits, and I am a very big fan of shooting portraits wide open or at very, very low apertures. So f2.8, f2.5, f1.8, f1.4 if I can go down that low, and having a very quick shutter speed like 1/8,000th of a second allows me to shoot a lot of work at very wide open apertures, which is the way I creatively express my style. Is I really like shooting wide open, and that allows me to do that. For instance, if I was to shoot with a different camera like my Pentax ME over there, which goes only to 1/500th of a second, I find myself having to close my aperture down to maybe f5.6 or f8 in very bright sunlight conditions, or alternatively using an ND filter, which sometimes is not the most ideal thing to do. So I really dig the fact that it has got a very fast shutter speed of 1/8,000th of a second. This camera has also got all the modes of a modern of a modern camera. So you've got your manual, your aperture priority, your shutter priority, your program mode, and it's got also some automatic scenes, so portrait, landscape, macro, sports. So basically it's a very user-friendly camera. So either you're a full-time professional wanting to shoot film, this camera will cover all the things you need from a camera, or even if you're a beginner wanting to get into film, I always say, things like aperture priority are a perfect setting to use on your camera, because you just you choose your aperture and the camera does all that, and the settings on this, the automatic settings on this are so good and so reliable. I 80% of the time shoot in aperture priority myself, which is very reliable, and it gets me the results that I need. And so if you're in the Canon system, this is a perfect camera to get into film if you're wanting to shoot film, because you've already got the lenses, so you don't have to go to the extra extent of trying to invest in lenses, which is basically how I picked this up, because I was already shooting Canon digital, so automatically leaned into something in the Canon system, so I could use all my digital lenses, all my lenses for my digital camera on this. And even if you're not in the Canon system, Canon has got one of the cheapest 50mm primes from most manufacturer, Canon 50mm f1.8. So you can pick up this camera and you can pair it with a used 51.8 and you're going to get fantastic results. This is a really, really good camera. Another thing I really like about this camera, which is not as important as everything else, is this camera's got a pop-up flash. So if you activate one of the modes for a pop-up flash, the camera will lift its flash like that, and most cases you'll close the flash like that. But in most scenarios, I just like the fact that this camera's got a pop-up flash, and to close the pop-up flash, so if you switch to a different mode, the camera will automatically close the flash like that. And I really think it's cool. I know it's not as important as most things, but I really think it's a cool feature, and every time I find myself turning this camera on and off, I seem to always want to just pop the flash up and send it down again. I know, something childish and useless. So yeah, to end off, you'd normally talk about the pros of something and then you mention a few cons, and honestly I've been using this camera for the best part of 3.5 years, and I haven't found anything majorly niggly about this camera, except the fact that maybe if you want something more compact, this camera is a bit big, but I really like the fact that it's quite a sizable and grippy camera. But yeah, I don't really have that much complaints about it. I use it most of the time. It's my go-to camera when I'm shooting serious stuff, as mentioned. And honestly, if I could recommend anything better in this budget line, I honestly don't think there's anything to beat this. This is a very, very solid, well-built, good, reliable camera for anybody wanting to get into film, be it you're a professional, as mentioned before, be it you're somebody that wants to get into film, or be it somebody that just started shooting film. This is a really, really ideal camera, and I could not send its praises any higher. I've done most of my portrait work on this, most of my landscape work on this. I do have a lot of other cameras which I use for personal shoots, but that's all for a different video. It's all those cameras have their quirks and charms, but when I want a serious, no-nonsense shoot, or something that I can just go out, shoot, get reliable results, this is my go-to camera. I've used it, as I said, for over 3 years, and yeah, I could not recommend it any higher. And finally, I'd like to thank you for watching this video, and if you've enjoyed this video, please give me a thumbs up down below, subscribe to the channel if you'd like to see more videos, and I will see you guys in the next one.